Sunnyland Slim, be careful how you vote here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Mark Crispin Miller, professor of media culture and communication at New York University, is our guest. His most recent book, Loser Take All. Who's Steve Spoonermore?
Stephen Spoonermore is a conservative Republican, a former McCain supporter, and most importantly, a renowned and highly successful expert at the detection of computer fraud. That's his profession. He works for major banks, he works for foreign governments, he works for the Secret Service. Those are his clients. He knows personally the principal players in Bush-Cheney's conspiracy to subvert our elections through electronic means since 2000, and he has named these principal players. Specifically, he has named a man named Mike Connell. Mike Connell, according to Spoonermore, is Karl Rove's computer guru. This is the guy who has helped Bush Cheney fix election results through computers since Florida 2000, in Ohio in 2004, also in the stolen re-election of Governor Don Siegelman in Alabama in 2002, also in the stolen re-election of Senator Max Cleland in Georgia in 2002.
How?
Well, basically, they use a kind of architecture that's called man-in-the-middle, and it involves shunting election returns data through a separate computer somewhere else. This is something that computer criminals do all the time with banks. Spoonermore explains that the man-in-the-middle setup is extremely effective and basically undetectable as a way to change election results. Now, the scariest thing is that Connell told Spoonermore that the reason why he has helped Bush Cheney steal these elections for the last 8 years has been to save the babies. See, we have to understand that there's a very powerful component of religious fanaticism at work in the election fraud conspiracy. We saw a little bit of that in Greenwald's film where Paul Weyrich was talking about how we don't want people voting.
Activists.
Well, because the majority is a majority of unbelievers. They're pro-choice. They're corrupt, they're evil, they don't get it. It's therefore necessary to fix election results in order to prevent the unjust and the unrighteous from taking over.
Professor Mark Crispin Miller, you keep saying the election was clearly stolen in 2004. This is not a widely held belief. Why do you think more information is not known about this?
Because the press and the Democratic Party have steadfastly refused simply to mention, much less discuss, the evidence.
You talked to John Kerry.
I talked to John Kerry. In fact, the last time I was with you, I was here to talk about that conversation with him on October 28th, 2005. We met. I gave him a copy of my book, Fooled Again, and we discussed the last election, and he told me with some vehemence that he believed it was stolen.
In Ohio in 2004, an Ohio key battleground state right now. And we remember at Kenyon, for example, those long, long lines in 2004, people waiting for hours. Right. When you talk about the computer setup for 2004, explain further.
Well, what happened was that the election results that were coming into Ken Blackwell's website, right, in real time.
The former Secretary of State.
The former Secretary of State.
Former chair of the Bush-Cheney campaign.
And co-chair of Bush-Cheney, and a big-time election thief, and an ardent theocrat, by the way. The election returns went basically from his website to another computer that was in a basement in Chattanooga, Tennessee, under the control of Spoonermore and a guy with another private company, another evangelical. The data was shunted through that computer and then back to the Secretary of State's website. Spoonermore says that this man-in-the-middle setup has only one purpose, and that is fraud. There's no other reason to do it. And he believes that such a system is still in place in Ohio. It's in place in a number of other states. And the crucial fact to bear in mind here, since we're talking about John McCain attacking Acorn and so on, is that Mike Connell is now working for John McCain. Now, on the strength of Spoonermore's testimony, right, it's driving a RICO lawsuit in Ohio. On the strength of his testimony, Connell has been subpoenaed. He was subpoenaed last week for a deposition so that he can answer questions on the record under oath about what he's been up to. He and a bevy of Republican lawyers have been very, very vigorously fighting this subpoena because, of course, they don't want him to testify till after Election Day.
Professor Mark Crispin Miller, the Bradley effect that is being discussed. Explain what it is and how you feel it's being used.
The Bradley effect is a theory which holds that African-American candidates do better in pre-election polls than they do in elections, because white racists are shy about admitting to pollsters that they wouldn't vote for a black man. So they will tell pollsters, sure, I'll vote for him. Then they sneak into the polling booth and listen to the inner Klansmen. You know, they vote as racists. Now, the problem with this theory is that there are almost no examples of its having happened. It's named for Tom Bradley, the mayor of Los Angeles, who ran for the governor of California and did much better in polls beforehand than he did on election day. Well, it turns out, if you study that race, that the reason why he lost was that a lot of bad news about his tenure in Los Angeles came out just before the election. That's the reason why people often lose elections. There are only 2 races that we know of where the Bradley effect may arguably have obtained, both in 1989, Doug Wilder's run for the governor of Virginia, and David Dinkins' first run for the mayor of New York, where Dinkins didn't do as well as we thought he would. Well, in his second run, the polls were dead on. The point is, we're talking about 2 races that may form the basis for this idea that Barack Obama, with his enormous lead, may lose because of millions and millions of closet racists, you know, who will say one thing to pollsters out of a fear of not seeming politically correct and then vote a different way. I'll tell you why I worry about this. Something that you very, very badly need to steal elections, aside from the apparatus and the volunteers and all the money and everything, is a narrative. You have to have a convincing rationale to explain an upset victory. 4 years ago, the rationale was millions of values voters materialized on the horizon at the end of the day. And like Jesus' loaves and fishes, they suddenly multiplied and voted for Bush, and then they disappeared. Well, there's no evidence that that actually happened, but it served as a narrative. This time, I'm afraid, the primary narrative will be racism. Barack Obama actually lost despite all predictions because so many Americans are racists. I think that this is, first of all, unverifiable. We don't know that it's true, whereas we do know all the stuff about vote suppression and election fraud. But I'm afraid that people will be encouraged to accept this line to prevent them from taking a hard look at the real reasons why Obama may have lost, and I put lost in quotation marks.
Mark Crispin Miller, I want to thank you for being with us. Mark Crispin Miller is professor at New York University and author of, well, the latest book he edited, this came out just this summer, Loser Take All, Election Fraud and the Subversion of Democracy, 2000 to 2008.